Meh. Let's talk about bad video game controllers, and I honestly think the Atari 2600 isn't that bad. Now, mind you, a lot of that is the benefit of hindsight and looking at it and saying, hey, this was basically square one and we could only go up from here. I figured it would be funny to start off the video with this because everyone else bitches about this controller, and like I said, it has the benefit of hindsight behind it. It's not perfect by any means, I wouldn't even say it's anywhere near comfortable, but for retro gaming, if you talk to someone in their 60s, chances are they've played with this. And if their stick is this stiff, they should probably talk to a doctor. Atari looked at that controller and they said, fear not, we're capable of far worse. Here is the CX78. Now this is the modern re-release of it. This isn't one from back in the day because this controller never released in North America to my knowledge. This was the pack-in with the European Atari 7800. So this is like the USB-C version that's like modern for the 7800 plus. This is far worse than the 2600 controller. And the reason I say that is because the NES controller was already a thing, and instead of like just copying that, they decided to put their own cute little spin on things by making it just genuinely impossible to use. So the 1 and 2 buttons are at the very bottom of the controller, which means you have to kind of crab grip it in order to hit them both if you need to like sort of leverage 1 to 2 like that, if you're running and then jumping. The biggest problem with this controller, obviously the elephant in the room, is whatever the fuck is going on here. Now you can actually unscrew this and it just becomes your normal run-of-the-mill D-pad. But it has a giant circle in the middle, which you'll find yourself sort of accidentally stubbing your thumb on, and it's not particularly comfortable. So you screw in the joystick, and like you can tell, there's barely any movement between left and right. It becomes the most stiff goddamn thing ever. It is not a comfortable controller. Like the 7800 Plus that I have gives you the option of using either of these, and I run for this every single time. I hate using this goddamn thing. Yeah, it's wireless, the modern versions, but that's it. Like that is the only benefit I could give to this. It is genuinely terrible. I actually do think it's worse than this. But while we're on the topic of weird shit from the late 70s, early 80s, let's talk about the Intellivision. This isn't technically an Intellivision controller, this is a Sears Telegame controller, and the reason why I differentiated that is because it's got a 9-pin out, which is nice because the original Intellivision didn't have removable controllers. It was built onto the console, which sucks. I don't know why they did that. So you spin this left and right, and then you can press it in for the world's loudest button. There's also 2 buttons on the left side and 2 buttons on the right side that are very, very stiff and uncomfortable, but they do the job. Now, why is it like this? Well, you know, back in the 1970s and 80s when video games looked like this, you obviously needed 12 buttons to control them. So here's what you do. You get your game, like Las Vegas Poker and Blackjack here, literally the first one I pulled off my shelf. And you get one of these nifty little overlays, and you stick it into the controller like this. There you go. And now you have to annoyingly look away from the television and look down at your controllers to figure out what you're gonna do. Because everyone loves looking away from the game when they're playing a game, right? I will say, I do appreciate the fact that the cartridge boxes actually had a dedicated spot for the overlays, because that makes finding complete in-box Intellivision games much easier than complete in-box Atari games. But that's still really dumb. Why'd you need to stick a piece of plastic in here? Couldn't they have made the games more simple? They're made of like 15 pixels. But it's not just weird toy companies from the 70s that release bad controllers, because even industry titans like Nintendo have released shit like this. I will never understand the love for this controller, and I should have nostalgia for this. This was like the console when I was growing up. First things first, how the fuck do you hold it? So like, there are a couple 2D platformers that need the D-pad, so then you gotta use A and B over here. Okay, A and B are fine. The C buttons are okay, although they're a little too small and spaced out for me. Whatever. So, you hold it like this. Well, what about a first-person shooter? Well, you have to hold it so that way you're using the joystick, and that way your index finger hits the trigger. Because everyone shoots with their left index finger. They definitely don't use their right on a trigger. What the fuck were they thinking with this? Like, genuinely, they should have had another trigger on the back of where your right finger goes. There are bumpers on the top, and there's a little expansion bay where you could put like memory cards in the rumble pack and stuff like that. But like, man, how the fuck do you hold this? I will say one thing about the N64 controller is that games were designed around it, like Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, like those games were designed with this controller in mind. So as a result, playing them with this doesn't feel too complicated, but it's just not something comfortable that I would want to do for long durations of time. And the joystick sucks. You will find so many of these controllers with broken joysticks. Spoon. The infamous Philips CDI controller. This is technically the USB re-release by Limited Run Games. I had to get my hands on this. It's actually not nearly as bad as people say. It's not comfortable by any means, but if you're not doing anything super intensive, if you're playing like a visual novel or whatever, this is more than comfortable to use one-handed. It's honestly kind of impressive. It reminds me a bit of the PlayStation Move controller in a way. I don't think that it's good for anything even remotely close to an action game, whether it be a platformer, fighting game, anything like that. But if you're playing something very slow-paced or doing a fucking PowerPoint presentation, I don't know, this is usable. You guys want to bully a freshman? Let's talk about the puke. Yes, I know the real name is the Duke, but like it's a bit of a meme of how gigantic this thing is. It's not that bad. I really do think it fits very nicely in the hand, but I've also got freakishly long pianist fingers, so that also might be the reason. And the buttons I actually do like. The ovals to me make sense because that's naturally where my thumb lies. But what on earth did they do with this analog stick? There's a tiny little concave section right in the middle, if you can see that. And the rest of it's convex, which means you're just gonna be slipping and sliding all over it. The left one's fine. This is just like a normal concave joystick like the 360 got later on. This one feels good, but not very comfortable with this. And the D-pad is horrendous. Like it barely resembles a D-pad at all. Like look how uneven that is. Like it feels okay in the hand, but like any actual D-pad is better than this. For fighting games, this is terrible, and there were a lot of really good fighting games this generation. So yeah, this isn't great. I mean, I feel bad because this is obviously Microsoft's first attempt, so obviously it's not going to be as good as some of their later iterations. And I do think the 360 controller is really, really good. So for what it's worth, the generation after this, they did fix it up. Actually, this generation, they revised this controller. They released the Japanese one in North America, and it made a lot more sense. But this is the controller. Whenever any of my friends growing up had Xboxes, this is the one that they had, and my little 6-year-old hands couldn't quite figure it out. Not a fan. So before we get to the final controller, which should come as no surprise if you know me, there are a couple that I'm going to be excluding for my own reasons. A lot of people shit on the Dreamcast controller a lot. I really like that controller. I think it's one of the more comfortable Sega controllers that have ever been released. And people hate the Wii U controller. They dog on the gamepad. I fucking love the Wii U gamepad. That thing is like perfectly handcrafted for me. Like it, again, weird long pianist fingers. That thing feels really good in my hands. So neither of those are making the list, but I'll tell you what will make the list. If you watch my content, this shouldn't surprise you. As a matter of fact, if you don't watch my content, it's kind of weird that you're watching my side channel, but regardless. This is the Retron 5 controller, and during my review of the Retron 5, I gave this a pretty scathing opinion. I said this is the worst controller that I've ever used. I'm gonna double down. I think this is the worst controller ever made. Since recording that video, I picked up that Spoon controller and I've played on a Sega Saturn. Neither one of them are even remotely uncomfortable compared to this. This is the worst controller that I've ever used in my life, and I can't imagine using a controller much worse than this. I would unironically take the Intellivision controller over this, and I'm not joking. At least that had definite left and right directions. What the fuck happened here? Look at how far the travel is with this analog stick. And by the way, need I remind you, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, NES, Famicom, Genesis, you didn't need an analog stick for any of those consoles. The only case you could argue is for fighting games or beat 'em ups where you needed to do combos. But then, like, why are you playing the home console versions if you're that much of an enthusiast? Just emulate the fucking arcade ones. They're not hard to run. The buttons not having letters or numbers is another thing that I dogged on in my review, but it seriously is annoying because they very easily could have done like ABC 1, 2, 3 and it would have been fine. But the fact that they're like a weird second D-pad design and then plus and minus, which take on a completely different meaning nowadays that the Nintendo Switch is out and that has an actual plus and minus button on it. This is a really bad controller. I'm also not a fan of the shoulder buttons. I did manage to unstick the right one, which did stick for a very long time. I think it was stuck in my review, but they're just way too loud and clacky. This feels terrible, and it doesn't work for any of the games that you're meant to play it with. It feels bad for NES games. It feels bad for Genesis games. It feels bad for Super Nintendo games. If you're playing a Game Boy puzzle game like Tetris, you're gonna double input using this imprecise ass, long ass travel joystick. And of course the input lag makes it entirely unusable. The new versions of the Retron 5 come with a Super Nintendo-ish joypad now, so you can just completely replace this. But I'm really unimpressed with this controller, and I'm mad. I'm just straight up mad that it's factored into the cost of a Retron 5, which I already think is overpriced for what it is. But the fact that this is part of the reason why it's overpriced, this is the worst controller I've ever used. If I ever make a part 2 to this video, I will let it be known I'm gonna be comparing every single controller directly up to this. This is a really shitty showing. So while we all may go on about how the DualSense controllers drift like motherfuckers and how the Joy-Con ones are too small, let it be known I would take these any day of the week over the Retron 5 controller. But what do you think? Tell me what some of your least favorite controllers are in the comments down below. I would love to know what your guys' opinions are. Until next time, this has been Dan Rock, and I'll see you guys later.